Good afternoon and welcome to Pittsburgh City Council's Cablecast public hearing for Wednesday, April 12th, 2024, relative to Bill 2024-0059. Will the clerk please read the title of the bill?
Bill 59, Ordinance Amending the Pittsburgh Code, Title 9, Zoning Code, Article 5, Use Regulations, Chapter 911, Primary Uses, at Section 911.02, Use Table in Chapter 911.04A69, Use Standards to permit single-unit attached residential uses in residential single-unit detached districts subject to certain standards.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So for the record, we are joined by several council members. We have Council President Lavelle, Councilperson Strasburger, and Councilperson Warwick. Thank you all for being here. And our first order of business will be to have an introduction by our esteemed folks at the Department of City Planning. To frame this conversation, I believe you have a presentation. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right.
Zoning Administrator, Assistant Director of Planning, Kate Rakes, who's our Senior Planning Manager. What we're going to do, Kate has the presentation pulled up. I was going to stall for a second, but we've got it up. Just want to, thank the City Council and the folks that are here for being a part of this discussion. I'll let Kate give the summary.
Thank you. I can move my own slide forward here.
Do you want me to do that?
Embarrassing. Do I need to do this? I guess I do. Okay. All right. So just a reminder of how we got here today at the public hearing on this legislation. So this was introduced at City Council and it was referred to Planning Commission on January 31st of this year. Planning Commission had its public hearing on March 5th and made a positive recommendation to City Council with one amendment. And we'll talk about that later in the presentation. And then we emailed and posted notice online 21 days in advance of this hearing today as required by code. All right, so just want to take a step back and make sure it's clear what we're talking about today. So we've got the graphics here for single unit attached versus single unit detached. So the house on the left is the single unit, or houses on the left are single unit attached, and they are each on their own property line. So they're each on their own parcel. Separated by a party wall down the middle. So it's not a multi-unit residential, it's not a two-unit residential, that's three separate properties on three separate parcels that are three individual homes. And then the property on the right is the single unit detached, which again is a standalone single family home. All right, and then just a reminder that what we're talking about is the single unit attached residential. We're not talking about two unit residential. So two unit is where one zoning lot, one parcel has two dwelling units that are contained within a single building. We're only talking about the single unit attached, which is one zoning lot that has one dwelling unit on it. All right, so what does this legislation do? So this legislation allows single unit residential uses in detached single unit residential zoning district. So currently these uses are prohibited in the same way that a commercial or an industrial use wouldn't be permitted in a single unit detached district. So basically it's a use variance, which is a pretty hard lift at the zoning board to get that relief when requested or needed. And then it further breaks down how we allow these single unit attached residential units in the detached districts. So for parcels with lots of 35 feet or smaller, single unit attached is permitted by right. And then for lot widths larger than 35 feet, single unit attached are permitted as a special exception, which by the standard special exception criteria. And that's a hearing by the zoning board. And the legislation doesn't change any other standards, setbacks, anything like that for these zoning districts. So where does the 35-foot distinction come from? So we took a look at the context of existing Pittsburgh neighborhoods, and those with smaller lot widths tended to have more existing single unit attached in them already. This is an example from Morningside. It is in a detached district, but the average lot width on this block is much less than 35. So we were just trying to set this threshold to sort of match where the existing attached townhomes already are. It'd be a contextual in those neighborhoods already. And then obviously the larger districts require that or larger lot widths require the special exception hearing. So just some information about the single-family detached district. The top is a link that goes to some GIS mapping that we did, and you can find this link on the city planning website. But just, I'm not going to read through all these numbers, but the total percentage of the city for this district is 26%, and then total percentage of residential zoning districts is the single unit detached is about 56%. So it is a significant percentage of our single family or our residential zoning districts. All right, and then our last proposed amendment is just to clarify that to change the use table here, originally it had A for administrator's exception, and we've switched that just to be P for less than 35 feet for permitted, or S for special exception for those larger lot sizes. All right, and that's my presentation.
Thank you very much. Corey, do you have anything to add?
I do not.
All right, everything was covered then. For the record, we were joined by Councilmember Kahari Mosley. And now we will move on to testimony from registered speakers. Please give your name and address for the record. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to address council. And just want to let everyone know that if there are speakers in here that haven't registered, then we will allow them to speak at the end of everyone who's registered. So our first speaker is David Demco. Dave?
Good afternoon, City Council. Thank you very much for being here. My name is David Demco. I live at 1303 Boyle Street in the city of Pittsburgh, and I'm here testifying as a resident of the city of Pittsburgh. I usually don't speak on things that aren't associated with my business, but this particular ordinance is so misrepresented, misguided, and unsupported, I had to say something about it. All the arguments supporting this ordinance are about affordable housing. That somehow that by changing the ordinance, we're going to be able to create affordable housing. Really, nothing could be further from the truth. At this point, I'm going to correct anyone who comes to this hearing with the claim that it'll create affordable housing. It will not. First of all, this bill has no affordable housing requirements. If it had affordable housing requirements, it would be a different bill, and we'd be having a different conversation, but it has no affordable housing requirements. The idea that upzoning will create affordable housing, particularly in this situation, is a myth. I know it feels good, it feels clever, it feels like we're going to do something about affordable housing just by changing the zoning rules, but in fact it won't happen. In fact, the evidence is the opposite. Land that is upzoned tends to become more valuable. The land increases in value. It's the same difference between residential and commercial property. Commercial property is more valuable because you have more options. And the same thing will happen here. It will not decrease housing, it'll increase land values. In fact, the land will, according to studies, it'll bid it up 3 to 5%, and more in the poorer neighborhoods. The average townhouse in Pittsburgh is $395,000 according to Redfin, and most of that's construction costs, and that's the average townhouse. That's not a new one. Why would a developer charge less, okay, if there's no affordable housing requirement? What you'll get is what you're getting in my neighborhood. You'll get luxury townhouses that are $500,000, $600,000, $700,000. That's what developers are going to do to take advantage of this particular ordinance. If you're looking for affordable housing, you should focus on multi-unit, not on attached housing. The distinctive quality of R1 zoning is the detached part. That is the distinctive quality. This bill would end R1D as we know it. The entire city would be R1A at best. The purpose of zoning is to protect the context and character of the neighborhood. People that live in R1D neighborhoods do not like their property rights taken away from people that do not live in R1D neighborhoods. Needless to change, this change will not be popular in long-established R1D neighborhoods. Thank you very much for your time.
All right, thank you. Our next speaker is John Hammerhan.
Good afternoon. My name is John Hanahan. I live at 439 Katoma Street in Fineview. And I'm here today for 3 reasons. 1, the cost of a home, whether to buy or rent, is too high. Housing cost inflation has been the defining source of economic malaise of my adult lifetime. And now we are seeing housing cost inflation as one of the stickier, more frustrating areas of price increases, which is not only contributing to the persistence of overall inflation, but also, and more importantly, confirming people's suspicions that our housing market is broken in a fundamental way. We have to make more low-cost housing available. And so we cannot maintain zoning rules that needlessly delay the construction of homes for poor and working class people. 2, our planet is warming. The incentives and regulations that encourage sprawl and the carbon emissions that come from living in the sprawl are only making matters worse. We know that it is much easier for people to reduce their carbon emissions by living in dense urban areas. But we also know it isn't that easy. It isn't easy to buy an old row house within walking distance of a grocery store. My girlfriend and I tried. We couldn't do it. We couldn't afford it. The old row houses are getting more and more expensive. And the zoning rules, again, are getting in the way of the new row houses. So for the sake of a livable planet, we must re-embrace Pittsburgh's wonderful historic density. We need to live closer to our neighbors, and our houses have to be allowed to touch. 3, when I first moved to Fineview in May 2021, I was promised new neighbors on Lanark Street. I was told that this community land trust called City of Bridges was working with my neighborhood group, the Fineview Citizens Council, to build and renovate 8 homes directly across the street from our city park. I was so excited. That was 3 years ago. Those homes are not built. Those 2 renovations are underway, but a child should have learned to walk in one of those homes by now. You are going to pass this bill. The City of Bridges Community Land Trust is going to build those new homes. And we in Fineview are finally going to meet our new neighbors. Thank you for this ordinance.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Christopher B. Maybe online is.
I am online.
Okay. Please begin.
Esteemed members of City Council, thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today. My name is Christopher Beam, and I'm testifying before you today from my attached home here in Bloomfield at 4705 Lorigan Street. First of all, I want to say thank you to Corey Lehman and Kate Ruckus for putting together the presentation and the associated GIS map that let us, members of the public, see the impact of this legislation. Just over 3 months ago, I congratulated Bobby Wilson and the 7 other co-sponsors of Ordinance 59, the proposed amendment to Pittsburgh's zoning code for legalizing attached housing citywide. Since then, the zoning amendment has made its way through Planning Commission, where several people testified in opposition to the amendment for a lot of disingenuous reasons. Several people complain that this amendment is subverting the process, since the comprehensive plan process was kicked off earlier this year, and that nothing should change until that wraps up. However, that process will take years, and we are facing an affordability crisis in Pittsburgh today. We cannot afford to delay legalizing housing abundance any longer. A few other people complained to the Planning Commission that this bill would ruin the good views of neighbors to the City of Bridges Community Land Trust homes because they wouldn't be able to see through the attached homes. But huge portions of our city have good views of our urban landscape despite having legal attached housing. Bloomfield has amazing views of North Oakland from across the Hollow. The Southside Slopes in Arlington have great views of Oakland, and Lawrenceville has great views of Millville and Troy Hill. This is despite these neighborhoods having legal attached housing. Finally, the last group of people who opposed the change stated that it would change the character of their neighborhood to legalize attached housing. To those people, I urge them to reconsider why the neighborhood should be frozen in amber only after they themselves move there. We live in a city, not a suburb, and our neighborhood should grow and change as residents grow older, new Pittsburghers are born, and new residents move to our vibrant city. As I stated back in January, I strongly encourage all city councilors to vote in favor of this modest legislation to allow homes to be built for our most vulnerable neighbors economically without the added expense of wasting land with excessive side yard setbacks that keep projects from getting built quickly and affordably. I also encourage City Council to continue to look for more low-hanging fruit of zoning reform that will help address the housing affordability crisis while the comprehensive plan process progresses over the next few years. We need to reform our parking mandates, legalize ADUs, and increase density along our PRT transit corridors, and so much more. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak before you today.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Joanna Deming.
Good afternoon. Great to see you all. Thanks for having this opportunity to speak. Joe Deming. I live at 447 Marshall Avenue, Pittsburgh 15214. I'm the Executive Director of the Pittsburgh Food Policy Council, formerly the Executive Director of the Perry Hilltop and Fineview Citizens Council. While I know I focus on food now, food and housing are intricately linked. As we increase food access in communities that lack it, we will increase property values. Affordable housing is needed to keep people in the city close to jobs, transit, and food. I'm in support of this zoning change. While for-profit housing may be developed with it, we can also afford to develop more affordable housing. Single family has some things about it that are inherently racist. It was used by people in the suburbs to keep the suburbs white. It's been used in the city to keep neighborhoods white. And we are now the oldest and whitest city of the largest 30 cities in the country. And not to mention that, it's not only people with low incomes that can't buy a house, it's people that can't buy a house in Pittsburgh now. Zoning change is necessary to allow for that greater density, that more affordability. I got involved with Fineview Citizens Council because the council came to Perry Hilltop and said, we want to keep Allegheny dwellings residents in our community when it gets developed. You know how rare that is for people to come and say, we want to keep these public housing residents in our community. And that's why we were awarded a HUD Choice Neighborhoods grant to create that plan and work with our neighbors on how that was going to work. And we developed that plan, and it meant increasing some density in the neighborhood, which is scary, and it's a change, and I understand that. But this is really, the history of the community includes more density, and sometimes when you lose a lot of population in a city, we get used to that, but we need to build back. We need to build back our homes and our density. Racially motivated or not in my backyard is the message for those opposed to this policy, and it's a recipe for more exclusion as the outcome. So thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Amy Zayas. Amy, are you online? Oh,
I'm here.
I was looking this way.
Nice to see you all again. Thank you for having me. My name is Amy Zayas. I am a resident of Beachview. I live at 2040 Crosby Avenue. When my mother and father were 35 and 37 respectively, not only did they already have a child with a second on the way, my two older sisters, but they were buying their first home, the home I grew up in. I'm now 37 years old myself, which is crazy to think about, but not only can I not afford a home, I can't envision affording the costs of having a child on top of home ownership. And this is what's at stake here. Not only do we have young people like myself unable to afford a home and start a family, but also routinely underprivileged communities being driven away by the housing crisis that plagues not just our beautiful city, but the entire country. For those who want to stand here and complain that this is a sweeping change or that there's no urgency to the matter, let me remind you that the comprehensive plan will take several years and is not legally binding. Whatever comes out of the planning process will not necessarily be put into action. Let me be frank, people like me cannot afford for the city to wait several years to make changes to the zoning policy. And for the detractors who want to protest that this change eliminates single-family zoning throughout our city, first, Not only is that a complete misrepresentation of what this change does, but second, I'd ask you, so what if it did? Let me remind everyone here of the racist and exclusionary foundations of single-family zoning, which was purposefully designed as a way to segregate minority families from white neighborhoods. Those who argue in favor of keeping single-family zoning are sending out a dog whistle. They're telling us loud and clear that they want to continue historically exclusionary and racist practices because it benefits them personally. Some have tried to argue that this change ruins the fabric of our neighborhoods and the quality of life for existing residents, but Pittsburgh is already full of attached housing, which by current zoning standards are illegal to rebuild should they, be torn down. So I urge you, our council members, to disregard the aesthetic concerns of largely wealthy, older, white homeowners and instead focus on what's at stake here. If we want the future of Pittsburgh to remain welcoming, diverse, and livable for everyone, we need to make these changes now. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next registered speaker is John Seifer.
Thank you. My name is John Seifer. I live at 6622 Northumberland in Squirrel Hill. And I want to support this because anything that you do to make more housing brings down the cost of all housing, whether the housing that's built is market rate or lower. I have an example of that since 1991 to 2016. I owned a company that sold an amenity to the apartment industry nationwide. And our sales started to flatline in the early 2000s. And when we looked at why, we realized that interest rates were coming down, and so houses were becoming more affordable. So the people in the highest level apartments moved up to buy houses. And so the rents in the highest level apartments came down. And the people in the B properties moved up to the A properties. And the rents in the B properties moved down. And the people in the C properties moved up. The point is, the more houses you have, of any size, any level, the more affordable all houses become. It's like saying if you want more used cars, you don't build used cars, you can build any kind of cars, and the people that buy new cars will sell their old ones, and there will be more used cars in the market. This has been proven in many other cities. Tokyo is one, Minneapolis is one, there are several others, where the more housing stock you build and the less restrictive you are, the more affordable housing is available. It's not the only way to get affordable housing, but it's certainly one thing that helps. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Emma Gamble.
Hi. Can you all hear me?
Yes, please begin.
Great. My name is Emma Gamble, and I'm the Community Engagement and Program Manager for Lawrenceville United. I'm speaking in support of the updated legislation to allow single-unit attached structures in single-unit detached zoning districts. Outdated zoning has prohibited the development of necessary and affordable mixed housing across our city, especially at a time that is so clearly needed. As the resident advocacy organization in Lawrenceville, founded in 2001, LU is all too familiar with how our residents have been impacted by the affordable housing crisis, especially our Black and brown neighbors. Between 2010 to 2020, Lawrenceville lost over 2/3 of our Black population, and the city of Pittsburgh also saw a loss of over 10,000 Black residents at that time. As a result, Lawrenceville neighbors came together to form the first community land trust in Western Pennsylvania, pass inclusionary zoning policy for the neighborhood, and advocate for the housing community fund. But serious commitment from the city to change zoning law is needed in order for us to keep Pittsburgh affordable and home to all its residents. Zoning is intended to protect the fabric of our neighborhoods, but the current zoning code has often become a barrier to addressing the affordability crisis and health for our neighborhoods in Pittsburgh, rather than being a part of the solution. This proposed amendment to allow single-unit attached structures is a modest step in the right direction. It recognizes that Pittsburgh is changing and the needs of our residents, longtime and new, have too. We need to ease the ability to build the housing that our neighbors so desperately need while increasing neighborhood density and affordability. We hope that the City Council moves forward on approving the zoning code change. Let's keep Pittsburgh home. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Melvin Walls Jr.
Oh, thank you all for being here today. My name is Melvin Walls, and I live at 5624 Darlington Road in Squirrel Hill. I'm here today to express my very strong support for Bill 59. My household is only 2 people, and our lifestyle doesn't require that much space, but we have a large dog, and this disqualifies us from living in many apartment buildings. We were relieved, though, when we moved to Pittsburgh to learn that we weren't limited to renting a large detached house on a large lot. Choosing to live in one would have meant displacing a family that could have, frankly, made much better use of all that space. We were able to rent this adorable townhouse, and we love it. Our neighbors are amazing and super welcoming. We trade baked goods and leftovers. We help each other move heavy furniture and collect each other's mail when we're out of town. And if we're lucky this weekend and the rain breaks, we're going to have a barbecue in our shared yard. This built-in sense of community is a pretty sweet perk, and it all happens simply because I bump into my neighbors while going about my normal life. And honestly, this dramatically outweighs any concerns I used to have about the awkwardness of sharing a wall or a yard. I feel incredibly lucky that I found this living arrangement so close to where my partner works and within walking distance of my daily needs. But not everybody is so fortunate. Many people with dilemmas like mine are forced to live far from where they work and outside of the reach of the amenities Pittsburgh has to offer. We need more choices, and this legislation is an important first step towards providing them. And I strongly urge you to adopt it so that more people can choose housing that meets their needs without taking up large plots of scarce and increasingly expensive land. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker is Elizabeth Beam. Elizabeth, are you online?
Yes, I'm virtual. Can you hear me?
Thank you. Please begin.
All right, thank you. Thanks, my name is Elizabeth Beam. I'm a resident at 4705 Lorgan Avenue. It's in Bloomfield. Thank you, members of the City Council, for allowing me to speak today. I would like to join a lot of these other speakers in support for Ordinance 59 and attached housing. This is a foundational trait of many existing neighborhoods in Pittsburgh, and it allows so much greater opportunity for people to afford living where they wish, which understandably then contributes to growth and flourishing of these Pittsburgh neighborhoods. This change is not a cure-all, but it's a very important step in continuing to grow these neighborhoods. Please pass this ordinance and continue to address these stifling zoning laws to contribute to the health of the Pittsburgh housing market. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker is Demitri Black.
Hello, my name is Demitri Black, and I live in Squirrel Hill South, District 5. When my partner and I moved to Pittsburgh, because of work-from-home policies, we could have literally chosen any location in the country, but we chose Pittsburgh. We chose Pittsburgh for its dense and walkable neighborhoods and relative affordability. After moving here, much to our dismay, we found that Pittsburgh had implemented the same policies that had ruined our respective hometowns and made them inhospitable to families. They're expensive, choked with car traffic, and overrun by homeless encampments. I want the City Council to allow the type of homes to be built that make our city dense, walkable, bikeable, safe, and affordable. Dense development means less infrastructure for the city to maintain. It means that families do not need to afford multiple automobiles just to live their lives, and it makes public transit a feasible option. I'm not asking you to change our city. I'm asking you to allow, once again, the type of homes and neighborhoods that make Pittsburgh a great place to live. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Bob Malikoff.
I'm Bob Malikoff, 913 Brighton Road in Allegheny West. This legislation is based on misinformation regarding the purpose of zoning in Pittsburgh and how it is administered. You had a post-agenda session with a completely unbiased topic, the broken zoning code, which consisted of a 2-hour presentation by an anti-zoning radical from California from an organization with a ridiculous name of YIMBY. His knowledge of Pittsburgh was very limited. Well, here's my 2-minute presentation on the zoning code is not broken, city council is. The current zoning code was implemented in 1999 following a detailed city planning study which involved many city residents and property owners. Over the next few years, the whole city was rezoned with input from people in the neighborhood. Zoning is not a problem, it's a planning solution. Areas are rezoned based on what is currently there, plus what the plans are for the future. It protects neighborhood properties from inappropriate land uses, providing some stability to the neighborhood. Variances approved by the Board of Adjustment are exceptions to regulations that cannot be reasonably accommodated for a particular project. Most dimensional variances, such as minimum side yards, front yards, etc., are routinely granted. Use variances permitting land use is not permitted by the particular zoning, require a higher level of justification, and are rarely granted. A special exception, which is not very special and not much of an exception, allows the Board of Adjustment to add some special conditions to protect nearby properties. Very few special exceptions are denied. I do not understand the logic behind requiring a special exception for an attached house with a frontage greater than 35 feet in this legislation. Zoning changes should be studied in detail to avoid unintended consequences. With reduced zoning protections, developers would flock to a neighborhood and build unpopular, inappropriate developments, not in neighborhoods that need significant development, none of which would be affordable housing. Some residents could think that the future development of their neighborhood is uncertain and decide to move to Monahall or another nearby suburb where neighborhoods are protected. You are not doctors, but please do no harm. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Christine Wispel. Christine, I believe you're online. Please begin. If you're on mute, I think it's *6, *8. Which one is it? *6. All right, Christine, we'll come back to you at the end. Make a note of this. Next speaker is Catherine Broski.
Hello. I had pictures for everybody, but I was told I couldn't hand them out to you, so I'm going to have a person help me. Dear Council Representatives, I'm writing to urge you to vote no on Council Bill 59. I became a resident in 1996 when I bought a vacant attached house and restored it, which means I've been paying city taxes for 28 years. I'm disappointed I only get 3 minutes of your attention to tell you what a bad idea this proposal is. I apologize if rushing makes me hard to understand, and I request you read all of my unfinished comments. Any blanket approval process, irrespective of lot size, undermines and is contrary to the purpose of zoning, especially in an area that has Pittsburgh's unique terrain. Per the department's webpage, the intent of zoning regulations is to allow property owners a reasonable use of their property as long as it's not detrimental to the neighborhood. How can you regulate whether a use is detrimental if you have already given blanket approval? For residents like myself who own lots less than 35 feet wide, this proposal removes the fundamental right to oppose a detrimental use. Per Councilman Wilson's press release, having to apply for a variance is a rule that sets an unreasonably high legal standard. If attached row houses aren't detrimental, then why would a review by the zoning board be unreasonable? Since the review process itself isn't difficult, it appears the real intent of this proposal is to deny the owners of small lots the right to object. I hope council doesn't think that the owners of smaller lots are undeserving of the green space, setbacks, parking, and other protections offered to the wealthier owners of larger lots. Attached homes mean my neighbor could build his second-story addition right up to the property line and is allowed by right to have his structure loom over my home, blocking sunshine from my windows and depriving me of any sense of privacy. Thank goodness I was able to rely on setback requirements to ensure that a whole 8 feet separated me from his addition and large deck parties when he built it 2 years ago. What hope for comfort and peace of mind will small property owners have under this proposal? This harmful outcome is the result of relying on the incorrect assumption that things like parking and setback requirements are not missed in areas where attached homes currently exist. As a person living in this situation, I appreciate the opportunity to offer evidence to the contrary. As you can see from these pictures on the streets that I live in, the steepness of the hillside make widening the roads difficult. Without the pictures, you might miss that emergency vehicles can't turn the corner if there are cars parked on the right side, which is frequently despite the fire lane sign being clearly posted. While there are more orange cones in a construction site, the only thing keeping animosities over parking from becoming fixable is that some of the lots and structures are vacant. This uneasy peace is likely to end when the 6 units of short-term Airbnb rental currently under construction are finished. Unfortunately, the city's new policing policy is to respond only to in-process emergencies and to offload issues like clearing the fire lane to the parking authority. The parking authority hasn't made any announcements about any new initiatives to process parking complaints, build more community parking lots, or expand the permanent parking program. There's also been no announcements regarding restrictions on short-term rentals that squeeze residents out of parking in their own neighborhood. Perhaps if short-term rentals were required to be owner-occupied activity by investors, wouldn't drive up the cost of rental housing and squeeze out the availability of affordable units. Perhaps the answer to increasing the availability of affordable housing is more, not fewer restrictions.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Julie Negro.
Good afternoon. My name is Julie Nigro. I'm the Director of Real Estate at City of Bridges Community Land Trust. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I am speaking to you from my home at 418 North Graham Street in Garfield. As the Director of Real Estate for City of Bridges Community Land Trust, I see firsthand the direct impacts that current zoning has on our housing development projects. This zoning reform would remove some of the barriers that we face when trying to build much-needed affordable homes in our city. The current zoning adds time and money to projects that already face an uphill battle. By allowing attached housing to be built by right, we would not only
I'm sorry, Julie. I'm not sure what happened. We'll wait a couple seconds here if you're going to come back on. It's *6, maybe if you accidentally put yourself on mute. All right, I will make a mark here. We'll also call your name at the end. Next speaker is Mel Packer.
Mel Packer, 623 Kirtland Street in Point Breeze. I speak today doing something I'm not fond of doing and often claim, perhaps falsely, that I seldom have to do it, and that is to admit I've been wrong. I'm a retired 79-year-old homeowner living in a large 6-bedroom house with my wife on a block in Point Breeze populated by similar homes. It's an almost sadly all-white neighborhood in which there are today no homes that will meet the affordability standard. People in my neighborhood will cling firmly to maintaining the single-family zoning on every block, which serves, as you can imagine, to keep those harmed historically by racial discrimination from living in this admittedly lovely neighborhood. Some years ago, a somewhat shoddy landlord owned the building next door to us. It had 3 illegal apartments. We all let it slide. When he decided to sell it, he asked for a zoning change to a 2-family unit. I helped organize the block to oppose that effort, and after 2 hearings, he gave up and is now permanently a single-family rental unit. I was wrong. I was wrong then, I was wrong historically, and the city is wrong if it doesn't take drastic steps to change zoning, not only suggested in this bill, but in other bills that may come up in the future. I don't need to school this council on the drastic and frightening shortage of affordable housing. This need cannot be met by giving wealthy developers a break in return for making 10 or 20% of their proposed units allegedly affordable at 80% of AMI. That standard is a cruel joke being played at the expense of those who work for low wages and provide massive amounts of service to the residents of this city. They deserve and have a right to truly affordable housing now and in the future. But the future is now. The future of Pittsburgh is, despite our lack of population growth right now, almost certainly going to have more residents in the next 20 years than we have now. We are fortunate to be in one of the most desirable areas regarding climate change. Both employers and employees will take advantage of this. We can either stay our current errant path and insist the past must remain in the future, or we can welcome new residents and keep old ones as well by changing zoning to permit higher density housing. This bill is one small, almost tiny step in that direction, but it needs to be passed. If we fail to increase density, fail to make our city truly more affordable, we will continue down a path that increases racial segregation by driving low-income workers, disproportionately black and brown, into deindustrialized suburbs, into the arms of slumlords. New residents will find a lack of housing, will migrate to areas outside the city, causing us to be inundated with auto traffic and the need for more parking garages and having more pollution. This cannot continue. Don't make the same mistake I made a few years ago when I opposed ending single-family zoning change on my block. We should support zoning changes in every neighborhood, including mine of Point Breeze, and make the city more welcome and grow the city's population. The future must be for all of us and not just for those of us living in the past. And that future is now. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jacob Brown.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jacob Brown. My wife and I live at 1900 Meadville Street in the city of Pittsburgh. And we do not want to own a car. We do not want to contribute to traffic and pollution and be stuck in traffic. We want to bike and walk and take transit everywhere. When we moved to Pittsburgh for new jobs 3 years ago, we looked really hard in walkable areas near grocery stores and jobs for a place to live that we could afford. Unfortunately, we simply couldn't afford to live in those places. The current residents changed the zoning after they moved in. Even though those neighborhoods are mostly townhouses and attached, that's what Pittsburgh's known for, and they love those neighborhoods for that, they pulled the ladder up behind them, possibly racially motivated, to keep the neighborhoods expensive and to keep empty lots unfilled with new housing. So we settled for Fineview. We love it, but Fineview is up a massive hill from truly walkable areas on the north side, and it's just a tad too far for us to justify getting rid of our car. We chose this neighborhood because we could afford it. Down the hill on the north side, near shopping and jobs, there's hundreds of vacant lots. Nearly every single one of them are less than 35 feet wide. This bill would make it legal to create more housing on those thin lots so that many more families like mine can ditch their cars and live in the most walkable areas of the city. New housing isn't affordable. New housing is always luxury, to use quotes, in some way or another, because it's brand new. But this bill will make it legal to increase the housing supply and build more homes. Yes, they will be luxurious in a way. They will be new. They always have to be new and expensive for a moment, but we need more housing stock. It's basic supply and demand. So I fully support this bill, and I think it's a huge step forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Tom Pike. Next speaker is Tom Pike. Tom, are you online? Not online. We will call your name after we go through all the list. Next speaker is John Rhodes.
Hi, my name is John Rhodes. I live at 3030 Wigan Street in Polish Hill. I'm the treasurer of the City of Bridges Community Land Trust. The mission of City of Bridges is to build community ownership that preserves permanent affordability, empowers individuals, and ensures responsible growth. This issue is all about ensuring responsible growth to create a Pittsburgh for all. According to Pittsburgh United, our city is facing the problem that an absence of affordable housing in good repair has displaced thousands of low-income families, particularly black families, pushing them farther from access to food, transit, healthcare, neighborhood and family support systems, and good jobs. We must come together to rewrite the rules, regulate rents, and build housing people can actually afford. Now, these words speak to the heart of the issue, and I hope they resonate with you. A single amendment to zoning code is a small but important change, one of so many that the city needs in order to ensure that we create a city for all. Pittsburgh's Housing Needs Assessment from January 2022 pinpoints the issues facing so many families who want to find affordable places to live throughout the city. In order to ensure affordability, the city needs to make several things happen. First, market forces have attracted lots of for-profit developers focused on market rate developments. If we want to make sure the city has affordable places to live for people of all incomes, policies need to make it easier for nonprofit organizations to build affordable housing. This zoning amendment would be one small way to make more low-cost housing available. Low-cost housing requires less cost to build those homes. Increasing opportunities for density in the city, like this amendment would allow, that creates cost savings that would enable low and median income families to access to more housing options. Outdated zoning prohibits the development of necessary affordable and mixed income housing across all 90 neighborhoods. I've seen this firsthand in my own neighborhood of Polish Hill. People deserve housing choices, whether meeting personal preferences or accommodating differences in ability and needs. Expanding zoning law to enable people to enrich their communities with homes that fit their needs is what we should be striving for. In Polish Hill, we are so grateful to have 4 permanently affordable attached houses having homeowners move in right now. And we've got 3 more about to break ground. Attached housing has enabled these units to come into existence. Examples of dense neighborhoods where attached housing would be incredibly helpful in accommodating populations but cannot be built under current zoning include Garfield, East Liberty, Troy Hill, Knoxville, Allentown, and many more. Thank you for considering approving this change. We have to make more low-cost housing available. Low-cost housing requires less cost to build those homes, increasing opportunities for density in the city. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Emma Gamble. Online. Okay, Emma, we see you online. We're ready for your comments. *6 if you put yourself on mute. Emma, we will come back to you. Next speaker is Matthew Indina.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please begin.
Greetings, councilors. Thanks for having me here this afternoon. My name is Matt Indina. I live at 1717 Warren Street on the north side. I'm commenting here today in vehement favor of the proposed change in the zoning ordinance. I've lived and or worked in Pittsburgh's north side for most of my adult life. I lived in the Mexican war streets in the 1990s when a single guy working a low-income job could still afford an entire home by himself. I was surrounded by row houses and appreciated the vitality of being in a dense multicultural environment. After growing up in Pittsburgh in the relative despair of the late 1980s and early 1990s, I finally felt at home in the city. I currently reside in Pineview with my family. I love it here. However, our current population in our neighborhood is 25% of what it was at its peak. You can immediately tell by not only noticing the empty spaces where homes once stood, but also by the amount of homes long abandoned in disrepair. Our home is adjacent to a city street that currently has 9 homes, but not a single inhabitant that has fewer than 4 legs. In addition to the oft-cited housing crisis issues of affordability and climate change, public health is also of immediate concern. My children have asthma, and it's aggravated by the unoccupied moldy homes that surround us on 3 sides. I would love to be able to share this space with other families who can live in a clean, affordable new home, even if it means that our walls touch each other. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jack Billings.
My name is Jack Billings. I live at 206 Gladstone Road in Squirrel Hill in Councilperson Strasburger's district. I am strongly in favor of the bill allowing attached homes citywide and thank the council for their near unanimous support of the bill. In the past few months, and earlier today, I have heard opponents to this bill state that there is no evidence that this bill will increase housing affordability. That is simply not true. From Anagol, Ferrerier, and Rexer 2023, estimating the economic value of zoning reform, we know that zoning reform such as this one does increase housing construction in a city. Further, from Pennington 2021, Lee 2021, and Asquith, Maston, Reed 2023, we know that increased housing construction does lower housing prices and increase affordability. This issue has been studied exhaustively in dozens of other papers. We have seen similar reforms happen recently in Austin, Texas, and Minneapolis, Minnesota, and have seen those reforms increase housing construction, bring down rents, and increase affordability. Since reading academic papers is hard and time-consuming, there have been numerous books and popular press articles written that collate and synthesize these results, including Nolan Gray's Arbitrary Lines, Joe McReynolds' Emergent Tokyo, and Richard Rothstein's Color of the Law, among other books, and articles such as Jerusalem Demsa's work in The Atlantic. When I email these comments later today, I will include links to all of these sources and several more that time prevents me now from mentioning. So to those who were previously opposed to this bill because they were uncertain of the evidence or unaware of it, I now look forward to you giving your full-hearted, genuine support for this bill. As I said in January before this council, the bill is a necessary first step. I encourage more zoning reform and the readoption of land value taxes with regular assessment in this city. Doing so will increase the supply of housing of the city, lowering rents and housing costs, increase affordability, and making it easier for our neighbors to live here. In the final sense, every home delayed, every home not built, means a family without a home in Pittsburgh, some driven out of the city, some driven into homelessness. To fail to act is to ignore their lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker is Nicholas R. Rizio.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, please begin.
Great. My name is Nicholas Rizio. I live at 717 Liberty Avenue in downtown Pittsburgh. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. So I want to speak in favor of this ordinance. I did not grow up in the city of Pittsburgh. I actually just moved here a couple months ago in February. But a situation from my childhood is illustrative for the ordinance that we're seeing today. I grew up in a single family home in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. But my neighbors had a wide variety of homes available on their block. One of my neighbors had a duplex, one of my neighbors had a triplex. Down the street, there was an apartment building that used to be a schoolhouse, and on the other side of the street, there were a collection of single-family attached homes, which we would call row homes. One of my childhood friends lived in one of those row homes, and although I lived in a single-family home, I didn't find my neighbor's home to be offensive to my neighborhood character. It did not destroy my neighborhood character to have her in my neighborhood, it enriched it. Although my family was privileged to be able to afford to live in a single family home, my neighbor, on the other hand, was able to buy or rent one of the row homes because it was smaller and cheaper. And so this situation is often illegal in many cities today, Pittsburgh included. The row homes aren't allowed in my hometown anymore. In Pittsburgh, we have many beautiful row homes. I remember walking through the Mexican War streets and I was like, wow, these homes are absolutely beautiful. But oftentimes, they're not even legal to build. And so what does it say about our city when we have existing non-conforming uses? It says that in our idealized version of Pittsburgh, that home wouldn't exist. Imagine walking up to someone's door and knocking on their door and saying, in our ideal version of Pittsburgh, under our zoning code, your home would not only exist, you might not even have a space to live in the city at all. I find this to be highly offensive, and I think that the rest of the city council should too. And so the last point I want to make is that don't just think about the people who are here today arguing in favor or against this ordinance. Think about all of the people in the future who will benefit from new housing being built in the city of Pittsburgh. Many of these people have jobs in other cities right now. Many of these people might be children in high school, and many of these people may not even have been born yet. I didn't know that I was moving to the city of Pittsburgh until last August when I received a return offer for my internship. Please support this ordinance for the good of all of our residents, past, present, and future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Aniket Hirebet. Aniket, are you online? I will call your name at the end. Next speaker is Adrien Johnson.
Good afternoon. My name is Adrien Johnson. I am living at 1615 Meadville Street in Fineview. We are relatively new residents. We bought our house in 2019 after a 3-year search. We were looking for the perfect old house to renovate historically. Anybody who's ever taken on this old house can tell you that it's a commitment that's greater than money. It basically is, it consumes your life and all of your spare money. Now, one of the reasons that we chose to have our house in Fineview was the R1 zoning. The neighborhood is compact, but there's still room for trees, there's still gardens, and there's still plenty of room for nature. Parking is a problem, but with R1 zoning, it's manageable. Now I'm coming before City Council because all of the protection of R1 zoning could be taken away by this rushed passage of an ordinance that would change the character of R1 zoning. Before those who are affected would even know. Most of the people who live in R1 zoning are not here today. They aren't aware of this. What you're hearing predominantly is people from City of Bridges and public groups who are associated with them. You don't hear from very many of the residents. They're not aware that this is going to be happening to them. Before you rush to pass this ordinance, I think you should be aware of possible unintended consequences. One of the consequences is you find out why people do not prefer row housings. They are okay in a pinch, but you're basically tied to the ability and the motivation of the rest of your row house neighbors to maintain the house and keep it in order. You're also talking about people who are looking for affordable housing, being able to afford this. The second is, this ordinance doesn't say whether or not someone can force you to allow their house to join to you. Whether my house, it was built in 1885, long before the zoning, can somebody come along to the vacant lots that are beside me and require me to attach to my house, which I think with an 1885 house, it would be actually very disastrous. Now, secondly, on the other side, there's some room. Would I be able to remodel my house to go all the way out to the edge of the side yard? Would I be able to take that space for whatever use that I want to do? The reason for the setbacks in between houses is it's only 6 feet, 3 feet on each side. That gives you barely enough room to maintain your house.
Thank you.
And,
All right.
okay,
Thank you.
I guess I'm out of time.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mark Patty.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes. Hi, Mark. Please begin.
Thanks, Councilman. Good afternoon, Council. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Mark Patty, and I've been a resident of Lawrenceville for almost 9 years now, 4207 Bessemer Street. And last year I was lucky enough to purchase a house in the neighborhood that I love. But many of my friends and neighbors haven't been able to obtain that same stability for themselves. And I often think of my neighbors down the street who couldn't afford to stay in the house that they had lived in for 10 years. After a new landlord bought the house and jacked the rent up, I've watched coworkers who lived and worked in the city since college graduation continually struggle to buy a house in our rapidly appreciated market. Excuse me. I've often wondered whether they would have been able to obtain homes of their own and remain in the neighborhood if more plentiful, affordable homes had been available to them. So that's why I'm calling in to voice my vehement support for Councilman Wilson's bill to amend the zoning code and legalize attached housing throughout the city on R1D. Affordable developments like the one proposed by City of Bridges offer unique opportunities to provide the stability of home ownership to Pittsburghers who need it most. And the fact that these opportunities risk being sunk over an outdated zoning code banning attached houses in so much of the city is exceedingly frustrating. The fact that an affordable housing developer can't build row houses that are an exceedingly common architectural feature of both Pittsburgh and the neighborhood of Fineview strikes me as exceedingly bizarre and needlessly complicated. Opponents claim there's no evidence that the bill will make housing construction more affordable. But this seems like an odd assertion given that the City of Bridges Land Trust has outright stated that they would have to spend an extra $120K on these units because of the attached housing ban. money that could have gone towards other affordable developments. The opponents will also try to provide strange talking points about a view these houses don't actually threaten and diversity that they don't actually care about. When you read between the lines, what becomes clear is that the opponents of Bill 0059 are primarily motivated by a concern that more neighbors might make parking slightly more difficult for them. And if this is what the debate is really about, then we'd have to answer one fundamental question. Do we value the convenience of parking, or do we value the addition of new neighbors in a population-starved city? I truly hope that council supplies the right answer to that question. Thank you so much for your time. Let's get this bill passed.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Candace Kane.
My name is Candace Kane. I live at 334 Lafayette Avenue in Fineview. I ask you to reject today's council bill and allow development in Fineview to be part of a comprehensive plan. Although Councilman Wilson's zoning amendment is drafted as a citywide change, as we know, it was drafted to allow an 8-house development on Lanark Street in Fineview after a variance for attached housing was rejected on appeal. I was one of the appellants and was counsel on appeal. We reluctantly filed an appeal because the zoning board decision was obviously flawed, and we hope to continue talking to developers to reach agreement. The developers are City of Bridges and Fineview Citizens Council. They are asking today for a zoning change for their project, contrary to Fineview's community plan since the 1990s, to build detached, affordable houses. Their claim that adjacent neighbors oppose affordable housing or oppose development of 8 houses is not true. Instead, neighbors had urged developers to modify the project by building fewer houses on Lanark and building additional houses on other lots owned by the FCC, creating slightly more room on the lots. They said no. Fineview is a low to moderate income neighborhood of fewer than 600 households. Neighbors developed 30 affordable houses with small yards and front porches long before developers were interested in our community. Do we no longer have a voice? Because that is what by right means for Fineview. Fineview's narrow 20-foot wide lots were laid out a century ago for workers who did not have cars. Allowing attached housing by right on these lots will increase congestion and drainage issues in areas of Fineview already dense. Fineview itself is vulnerable to infrastructure and environmental issues. Lanark Street leads to our popular overlook. Although the FCC had title to the Lanark Street property before selling it, the lots were accumulated over many years due to Fineview residents working through volunteering, donations, and tax dollars. Developing affordable housing on Lanark has been in the works since at least 2002. From 1983, when the Fineview Citizens Council was founded, until 2016, its board meetings were open to members and the community. I was involved. However, member and community participation in the Fineview Citizens Council decisions ended around 2016. Since then, FCC board members meet behind closed doors with Perry Hilltop Citizens Council to decide Fineview's land use. Our community is shut out of decision-making. Finally, this zoning amendment creates 2 classes of Pittsburghers, those with small lots who get no hearing and those with large lots who are entitled to a special exception hearing. I ask you to vote no and instead proceed with a comprehensive zoning plan involving the public. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Crystal Jennings Rivera.
Good afternoon. My name is Crystal Jennings Rivera. I am the Director of Stewardship and Engagement at City of Bridges Community Land Trust. I grew up in East Liberty and I live in Allegheny County. I am here to express my support for updating legislation to allow attached housing. Working through my own community's experience after a mass eviction at Penn Plaza and throughout my career in housing, I have seen firsthand the devastating effects of lack of affordability housing in Pittsburgh. Individuals and families suffer because they cannot have the same comforts that you and I have. A safe, stable home, a place to eat a meal, to lay their head down at night, and to enjoy rest and security. According to a report from the U.S. Government Accountability Office in March, an average $100 increase in median rent in Pennsylvania is associated with a 9% increase in the estimated homelessness rate in our state. Last month, over 7,000 people applied for Section 8 vouchers. In the first 36 hours, they were available. A clear indication of the desperate state of housing in Pennsylvania, in Pittsburgh. While for those who can afford to buy homes for sale, in Pittsburgh are selling for 6.6% more than they were a year ago. That is up 25% since 2019. Outdated zoning limits, the development of necessary, affordable, and mixed income housing across all 90 Pittsburgh neighborhoods. While this updated to the zoning code won't fund or develop affordable detached homes, row houses, it will eliminate and underestimate circumstances and obstacles. The current zoning adds time and money to affordable housing development, delays opportunities for deserving families to get into homes and out of the city's housing crisis. This zoning change is critical in allowing us to provide more homes to more people in need. Today's communities can't be built on yesterday's zoning. Houses can touch. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Cassandra Armour.
Hi, my name is Cassandra Armour. I live at 1300 Gifford Street. I work for City of Bridges Community Land Trust, and I'm a proud Community Land Trust first-time homeowner on the north side. When I bought my house, a low-income single woman, one of the vendors in my home buying process gestured down the street at the 12 or so duplexes that lined the block of my house and said, "Are you sure you want to live on this street with these renters?" And I'm pretty sure she wanted to use another word. And I chuckled, and I said, "What do you think I am right now? I've been renting for 20 years. After 4 years in my diverse, vibrant Northside neighborhood, shout out to Marshall Shadlin, my neighbors, who are renters and homeowners alike in these attached homes, are some of the most thoughtful, connected community that I've had the pleasure of living alongside. These negative assumptions about our neighbors in apartments, duplexes, row houses, and any attached or high-density housing, and the perceived negative impact that they might have, that their existence might have, is the kind of contempt that we must continue to break down. Not in cities that call their sought-after row houses the more glamorous brownstones, and not in places where attached homes are the beloved bougie upgrade condos. Sometimes not even in our own Mexican war streets, where the beautiful brick row houses are so desirable that they're some of the most expensive homes in the city. But here in these rooms, we have to keep knocking down these barriers. From outdated assumptions to outdated zoning, bygone biases are hindering the development of necessary, affordable, and mixed-income housing where it's needed to help populations all across Pittsburgh neighborhoods. No, these proposed changes won't necessarily pay for or even push forward affordable attached homes per se, but they will eliminate an empty obstacle and offer an opportunity to begin rebuilding the health and stability of our city. There's no single, easy answer for increasing the supply of affordable homes in Pittsburgh to meet the desperate housing deficit, but this zoning change will help us provide more homes to more people in need. We must first agree, though, to care more about the value of people than the value of property and its amenities. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Our next speaker is Jacob Brown. Okay. All right, thank you. We weren't seeing him online. All right, so the next speaker is Sarah Axtell.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please begin.
Wonderful. Afternoon, members of the council. Thank you for allowing me to speak on this issue. My name is Sarah Axtell, and my address is 439 Katoma Street in Fineview. I believe I last spoke before the council more than 2 decades ago when I was 4 years old and petitioning for a playground to be built at Friendship School. So clearly I only comment when it's an issue that is very close to my heart, and I wanted to voice my full support for this ordinance. Growing up in Friendship during the late 90s and early 2000s, it was wonderful to watch as the neighborhood grew up with me and seeing its older housing stock of big Victorian homes like the one I grew up in being rehabbed and revitalized as the neighborhood became one of the most vibrant and livable parts of Pittsburgh. Alongside the redevelopment of these bigger detached homes, there have also always been attached row houses in Friendship, just as there are in Fineview. These houses are not considered lesser than by their residents or neighbors. In fact, they are often sought after, such as the tight-knit community and cozy backyards of Clarendon Place. In partnership with organizations like City of Bridges and future city ordinances that this ordinance is laying the groundwork for, we can increase housing stock with dense, beautiful, attached housing and simultaneously ensure that it will remain affordable for generations ahead. When my partner and I moved to Fineview in 2021, we considered the fact that the home we were buying, which was built in 1890, was attached on one side as a plus. We gladly welcomed the community closeness that attached housing affords, and not to mention the lower heating bills. Attached housing will not replace the detached homes of Pittsburgh. Instead, in conjunction with other existing housing options, it will, as it always has, encourage the diversity and neighborliness that allows our communities to thrive. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Hallie Powell.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Please begin.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Hallie Powell, and I live at 1718 Warren Street in Fineview. I'm here to express my support for this bill to change our zoning laws, and I really want to focus on the reality of the younger generation. I'm 29, and most people my age, my peers, my cousins, likely won't ever own a home. Detached houses are too expensive, and in the last 20 years, home prices have skyrocketed. Our generation, those younger than us who are now entering college and the workforce, simply can't afford homes, especially the large detached homes that we see in the suburbs. They take up more space, more land, and they create neighborhoods which, in my opinion, lack the key concept of a neighborhood, the fundamental human connection with your neighbors. I love Fineview because the homes are close together. When I walk outside of my house, my neighbor is often sitting on her porch and we have a lovely chat. I see people in my neighborhood when I walk around. I want more of that. I would love to see more people in our neighborhood, the type of wonderful, walkable neighborhood that we see in like 4 streets, where there are so many people that it creates a thriving neighborhood environment. I want to see more of that, and I think this bill would help that become a reality. And not only that, more affordable housing that people like myself and younger can actually afford to own. I urge you all to support this bill, and I truly hope that we see this pass and that we soon see more housing and more people in our own neighborhood of Fineview. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is David Vance. David, we see you online. Can you?
Yeah, sorry, just had to unmute. Can you hear me?
Yep, all good. Please begin.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is David Batts. I live at 5833 Northumberland Street in Squirrel Hill, and I'm here speaking as the leader of Pro Housing Pittsburgh, a group of hundreds of renters and homeowners in Pittsburgh that advocate for abundant and affordable housing throughout our region. It's great to see dozens of people here speaking to you, nearly unanimously supporting these great pro-housing reforms. As you can no doubt see, reforms that make it easier to build housing in our city are extremely popular. The residents of our city reject the exclusionary zoning of our past and desire to move into a future of housing abundance. I wanted to start by thanking Councilman Wilson for your leadership on this issue, and I also wanted to thank the other co-sponsors of the legislation for showing your commitment and leadership. Thank you to Councilman Mosley, Councilperson Charlin, Councilperson Strasburger, Councilmember Warwick, Councilwoman Gross, Councilman Coghill, Councilman Lavelle for helping to support this legislation. Legalizing housing typologies like attached housing is critically important for making it easier to build housing in our city. Indeed, it's what's driven affordability in our city across the decades. Pittsburgh is filled with attached homes, small apartment buildings, and other missing middle housing, much of which is illegal to build nearly everywhere. This legislation is a fantastic step in the right direction and one that Pro Housing Pittsburgh wholeheartedly supports. Our exclusionary zoning code was designed with the purpose of segregating our communities. Our work on undoing this harm is only beginning, and we must continue this work by boldly and aggressively working to eliminate barriers to new housing in our city. This includes the critical work of Ordinance 59, but it should not end there. Over the last decade, Pittsburgh has seen great success revitalizing our economy, creating new job opportunities for our residents, with many high-paying jobs flocking to our city. But this has created challenges, which I've sadly had to watch as numerous friends have been forced out of city limits by ever-increasing housing costs. My story isn't unique. Many lower-income folks have been pushed out of the city by the housing shortage that we're experiencing today. Meanwhile, Pittsburgh continues to be at or near the bottom of housing production among major metro areas. Similar metros like Cincinnati and Columbus are building far more housing than we are, and many of our peer metros are passing reforms to increase their housing production in order to stay affordable. Indeed, cities like Buffalo and Minneapolis are encouraging more housing in their cities by making it easier to build and are seeing great results, with Minneapolis even seeing real rents decrease since 2018. Pittsburgh should endeavor to be a leader on these issues. We can chart a new path starting with Ordinance 59. We can become a city that is known as a leader in housing policy, not a follower, by passing evidence-driven policies that help to drive affordability. We can aggressively change our zoning code to ensure Pittsburgh remains affordable for our current residents and future residents. We can become a city that becomes known for welcoming new people in, not gatekeeping this place that we love. And we can become a city that creates economic, social, and environmental justice for all of our residents. But we can only do these.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Morgan Shaw. Okay, we're not seeing you online, not in the audience. Next speaker is Vlad Kaplan.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, please begin.
My name is Vlad Kaplan, and I live at 546 North Sheridan Avenue in East Liberty. I'm speaking in support of the proposal to make it easier to build attached single-family homes in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh needs to build more housing to keep prices from continuing to increase, and this proposal will make that easier, since attached housing is less expensive than detached housing. In 2022, I moved here from the Bay Area in California, where I saw a housing crisis turn into an epic homelessness crisis and associated mental health crisis. In the Bay, I worked at a public library, which is a place of last resort for homeless people, and unfortunately, an environment where many people are experiencing mental health issues. There was actually a librarians conference out in Columbus, Ohio, a few days ago, and two of my Bay Area coworkers separately came out to Pittsburgh to check out neighborhoods and look at open houses after the conference. Not only because it's so expensive to live in the Bay Area, but also because of the stresses of a job that requires constant vigilance, which of course pale in comparison to the stresses and constant vigilance caused by actually being homeless. While I realize Pittsburgh isn't experiencing the same growth as the Bay Area, and our homeless encampments haven't swelled into tent cities yet, if we sit on our hands and don't make changes to bad policies which are supposed to maintain the context of a neighborhood, but which lead to class and racial segregation by making it more expensive to build and therefore live in certain neighborhoods in our city, and by limiting supply, the city as a whole, we'll end up in the same place. A surprising fact I learned when reading Pittsburgh's housing need assessment is that even as Pittsburgh was shrinking between 2015 and 2019, it saw an increase in the number of separate households in the city. Whether it's kids moving out and getting their own apartments, or singles and couples moving into the city, the need for housing actually increased in that span of time. Now that the city isn't shrinking anymore, the need for housing will become a more serious issue, and we need to take steps like this one to make it easier to build less expensive housing. The jury is not still out on this. The data shows that cities like ours that are building the most housing are seeing the slowest rent increases. While putting our intentions in writing in the upcoming comprehensive plan is great, at this point we don't need to study the issue. It has been studied and studied and studied. Making it easy to build housing of all types, especially denser housing, lowers housing prices overall. Thank you. Go Pittsburgh, go Pens.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Yvonne Brown. I just saw Yvonne step out. We're going to go through the speakers that we called upon and for some reason couldn't get in contact with. So we're going to go through this now. So I'll start at the top. For the first person we couldn't get in contact with, that is Julie Nigro. Okay. Great. I thought she got cut off. But, you know. All right, so the next speaker is Tom Pike. Next speaker is Emma Gamble. Do you want to read it? Okay.
Hi. This is Emma Gamble. I'm the Community Engagement and Program Manager at Lawrenceville United. I did speak earlier and clearly double registered, but I remain in support of this bill. But thank you.
All right, thanks. Next speaker is Aniket Hirebet. Okay. We'll go to Yvonne Brown as our next speaker.
My name is Yvonne F. Brown. I live in the Hill District. My councilman has left, but I wanted to ask a question about this affordable housing. If you go down Crawford Street, down to Fifth Avenue, you have a Mellon Bank there that they have closed, and there's trash and stuff around there. But if you go cat-a-corner to Caldwell Street, there's a affordable housing, supposed to be affordable housing. On there it said $2,500 a month, even though it said cable and some other stuff. Now this is in our neighborhood, the poor neighborhood. You close the bank, whereas you have all those people that work at Mercy Hospital. Why would you close the bank? But you got the bank closed, but then you can put up an apartment for $2,500. What poor person can do it? To me, that's gentrification. My counselor is not here. I wanted to ask him to explain it to me, how that happened. Caldwell, trash and dirt, but a house, $2,500, it's connected onto the side, like $2,500 a month for an apartment. Tell me how, what poor person can afford that? Then there's another suggestion, which you may not pay any attention to. You got a lot of homeless men that I talk to. There's a lot of them, there's plumbers, you got some that can build homes and so on. Why couldn't we take them homeless men, give them a job and a place to stay? If they work, they could have a place to stay. If they can do the job. I talked to a man that he goes and he does day work. He says, I'm a plumber. I just can't find a job, so he does day work. He has nowhere to live, so he has to go to a shelter. And they pay quite a bit in them shelters for a month. So if you just consider these homeless men, could you ask them if they're qualified to do any kind of work? Because if you could, why couldn't we use them and have them if they could have a place to stay, guaranteed a place to stay if they work, instead of being out on the street. And the way this city is, homelessness is not a crime, but here in the city of Pittsburgh, they've made it that way. I don't appreciate what the mayor has let the police do. Is not right. We have homeless people, and they're the same as us. They just may not have no place to stay. And all I'm asking you is to consider them as human beings and see if they can work for us and themselves to clear up the community. Homelessness is all over, not just Pittsburgh, it's everywhere. But if Pittsburgh, why couldn't we start an example? We put these homeless men to work. They want to work. They tell me they want to work. No jobs. We could make it. And if you, as the council, you sponsor this bill, you could sponsor something like that, or even question. Even if you could have an open hearing like that, bring the homeless in and ask them if they could work. We need more than what Jens are doing. Even though people say this is this bill is good. A lot of them agree with it, so it must be. I don't know about it. I'm trying to find out how come in our neighborhood we have houses $2,500 a month. Thank you.
Thank you. Having exhausted our list of registered speakers, are there any other speakers in the audience who would like to speak? Corey? No. All right. If not, we are going to move on to members. And I'm just going to go in order here, unless there's a...
No, you can go this way. I came in
Sorry,
late. I was in the back listening, but I came in late.
I wasn't doing a good job keeping track, so I was going to go this way, but...
So respectfully, I'll go this way. Is that okay?
Councilwoman Warwick?
Okay.
Would you like to begin?
Great. Thank you. Thanks for everybody. Thanks to everybody for coming out to speak. It's always appreciated. So, because I have some thoughts for both sides of this discussion. So my understanding, this started out as a City of Bridges project to build some affordable housing. The Zoning Board of Adjustment granted the variance, right? They looked at it, they thought it seemed okay. And then the neighbors appealed it with the courts. So, went against the expert opinion of our zoning board and appealed that expert opinion and got, the courts decided in their favor, which, I personally think was a bad decision on the court's part, which happens sometimes in the courts, as we know, as we all know. At any rate, and that quite literally directly led to this legislation. So for the folks from the neighborhood who are worried about the zoning change overall, if they had perhaps been more accommodating and, understanding of this particular affordable housing project, right? We might not be here today. I mean, I don't say for sure, but, at any rate, with the speed, certainly. Now, the next point I want to address is that this idea that City Council is rushing this decision. So first of all, there was that ZBA process, right, around this particular project, which was a long process. Then, of course, Councilman Wilson and his team wrote the bill, and I happen to know that Councilman Wilson did lots of community outreach, so much so as to actually sitting down in people's living rooms and having long conversations with them about this. Then, when you introduce a bill like this that affects zoning, there is, it goes to the Planning Commission, then we have public hearing, which is, so any change to the zoning code made or proposed, I should say, by City Council goes through a very lengthy process before it ultimately comes to final vote. And we are actually in the midst of that process right now. So the idea that this has been rushed, I don't think, I don't think that's a fair assessment. It is obviously clear that we do need to increase density in the city. We need more housing in the city of Pittsburgh. And not only do we need more housing, but we need to increase that density around because we are lacking in other areas as the city over things we can't control, like our public transit system, for example. We need to consolidate that density around our transit corridors and also, around our utility lines that we, are sort of upgraded utility lines we've spent lots of money upgrading. So it is in our best interest as a city to consolidate that housing and create that density in the area where, we can sustain more people. And also, we don't just, we do need affordable housing, but in particular, we need more affordable family housing, and that means 3+ bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, is better. And, the reality is that is hard in apartment buildings, right? Apartments are not, not to say you can't do it, right? New York City is a great place to live, but, in a perfect world, you don't have to pile multiple kids in a bedroom. You can, kids can have their own room. And being able to build more housing like that, this type of attached style is perfect for that, right? Is perfect for getting more houses that can accommodate families into a limited space. But with that being said, and this is actually sort of comes back to an earlier conversation we had at standing committee today about downtown, and is that, and I think I heard one of the speakers say it, not all housing is affordable. So this notion that you can just build a bunch of housing and that is automatically going to somehow trickle down into affordability is not, or is certainly has not panned out here in Pittsburgh, right? For the past 10 years, we have seen luxury housing go up in the Strip and in the South Side and in any number of other these hot markets, right? These hot neighborhoods. I've seen it myself. I've lived in Pittsburgh since 2014, and I have seen it with my very own eyes, and it has done nothing, as far as I can see, to make the city overall more affordable or those neighborhoods in particular more affordable. So not all housing is affordable housing. So with that in mind, the administration and I'm a big fan of Corey Lehman sitting right here. There is an inclusionary zoning bill coming our way soon. I'm not sure when, but soon is my understanding. And I really hope to see all these same people talking about affordability. And I'm looking at you, pro-housing. I want to see all these same people coming into this chamber telling us how any housing project in the city of Pittsburgh needs to include affordability. Because if I don't see you there, then I shouldn't see you here. And with that, I do want to continue that thought process and to talk a little bit about approach. Name calling is not a good approach. Going into communities and calling people names and sort of mocking the fact that they are concerned about things like parking and things like the sort of the general feel of their neighborhood that they have lived in for their entire lives is not a good approach. So when we talk about the need for zoning changes, and we need zoning changes, and we will be talking about this when we get into our citywide comprehensive plan, and we are going out and we are talking to communities all over the city, when we do that, the approach is not to tell people they don't know what they're talking about, or tell people that, they have some ulterior motives for what. The approach is to make your case. The approach is to sit down with neighbors and do your best and have coffees. And I'm not saying that hasn't been done, right? But I know that if you get on Twitter, that's not what I see generally. So I would say that, let's do what we can to come together so that everyone can understand that these types of zoning changes are really so good for Pittsburgh and will help us build the equitable, diverse Pittsburgh for all that we want to see. So thanks again to everybody for coming out, and that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to let council members regulate themselves. Who's next in line here? All right, thank you.
Am I on? Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. So I really always like to remember to thank people who made public comments, either by coming all the way down here downtown so we can kind of see and be with you in person, and also online, because we know that it's a great way for people to be able to make their voices heard even if they can't come downtown. And this issue is, I think, an issue that's been overdue. We probably should have already addressed this return to attached housing, where, as Councilwoman Warwick, I think, pointed out in some of our public commenters, where this was the form the neighborhood was built for, right? It was an integral part of these neighborhoods. I was thinking through streets in my district as I was listening to speakers, and with the exception of Stanton Heights, I can picture attached homes in every part of every neighborhood I represent. Right behind my own house in Bloomfield, and I live in Highland Park, but in my house, in various streets in Highland Park, various streets in Morningside, various streets in Bloomfield, in Lower Lawrenceville, in Central Lawrenceville, in Upper Lawrenceville, in Polish Hill. And so these were the forms the neighborhoods that I represent have been built around, and they're incredibly popular. and they're at every income level as well, right? And so they allow us to have neighbors at different income levels. I think one of the speakers mentioned that the homes in the Mexican War Streets are large homes that are attached homes, and very desirable and expensive homes that are attached homes in the Mexican War Streets. And I can really picture a range of sizes of attached homes in my district as well. Some are very small, some are very large, and there's a range of people of income levels and education levels that live in those homes. And they, you know what, I think I didn't hear, I heard a little bit about from some of the speakers today. In my district, there's no vacancy in those types of homes, in the attached homes that I can think of, really. I mean, we have a very densely populated areas, and the population has been increasing. And so in redistricting, my district, even before I was on council, it keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller because the population keeps increasing. They support your local businesses. And so you get the walkability that I heard some of the commenters talking about, right? And so I've been worried, and you've heard me talk out loud about it at the table before. If we decrease that density, we would lose the support for the main streets that have been so well maintained and didn't have the kinds of abandonment that other main streets in the cities have had, right? And so we can see lots of places where there was a thriving main street in the city of Pittsburgh, where now it's just been long decades empty storefronts. And it's really hard to bring those back. And it takes a lot of heavy lifting to do that. And I know there's people here in the room who have been working on that, so thank you. But where we have the density of attached housing, you are able to just walk right around the corner, walk to grocery stores, walk to a variety of small, locally owned shops. And those shops are getting the customers that they need. And those go hand in hand. So when we're talking about walkability, we're talking about local ownership and small business districts. We know we've struggled with the concept of how to align where people are living and where there's things like food, right? We're not just talking about amenities you don't really need. We're talking about amenities you actually need. Like, how do we do that? That is part of the job here at City Council. And so again, where we've invested in business districts, where we've invested in infrastructure already as a city, where we have streets and sidewalks and even city steps that connect the things that people need where they live and the things that they need, that's the right place to make sure that we can add adequate housing. We understand both sides of the issue, but I've often said in completely different contexts, we can't and we shouldn't deliberate like it's 1995. It's not 1995 anymore. That was a long time ago. And so we have to deliberate and legislate for now. And I think Mel said it. The time that now. How did you say it? It's now. I wrote it down, Mel. I wrote it down. The future is now. The future is now. This is the conversation we're having now, and so we have to make these decisions about the realities, the exigencies that we have now in front of us. So that's all, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Councilwoman.
Thank you. And so I just want to first thank you for putting forward so many things that you've been doing lately, but I do have my concerns because I do think this is so broad. But we were just talking a little bit, and I just really need to narrow down exactly, what it's going to affect in my district and who. But the one thing I can say is that I noticed a lot of white people coming down to speak for the black community, and it would be really great to have a hearing in the black community to hear what they really want to say. In my district, the area I have that's predominantly black, one neighborhood of all the neighborhoods I represent is Shortshire City. And they love their space, and they love their land, and I have a meeting with them this week, and I'll go over some of this and see. You're going to give me some information so I can let them know how it will affect them or not affect them. And I think that, and I grew up in attached housing. I grew up on 5th Avenue, 5th and Robinson, where there's a row of gray houses. That's where I grew up. And so I understand, and we had 17 people in our house and lots of people in one room, so with one bathroom. And so I can tell you, I know, I remember when I first got elected, somebody called and said, and there's 2 families living in that house. And I said, is that illegal? Because that's the way I grew up. So, I just didn't know, but that's what a lot of people do out of necessity. And so I mean, so I'm very sensitive to this because, as I mentioned, that I know the needs. It's how I grew up. But I also think that we do have a comprehensive plan. We just spent a ton of money, for the comprehensive plan, and I think we should be letting that guide us in terms of zoning and other things, and hearing from the residents, actually hearing from residents. But I do want to tell Miss Brown that Anthony Coghill, she talked about having the homeless people employed, and there's been a few times where I called Councilman Coghill and told him that there was somebody who was looking for a job, and he was homeless and needed to play, and Councilman Coghill offered them jobs. So I just want to say that he's already doing his own little employment project there. But I will say I do want to hear more from but I do hear from our residents in different ways, and I think that we do it really well in District 2. We have an abundance of affordable housing still in District 2, which is unlike the rest of the city of Pittsburgh. So we have an abundance of affordable housing, and we're continuing to build affordable housing in our district. But not because I came and pushed it on the residents, because I came and worked with the residents. And so because we do that, we were able to build additional housing. We built additional in Ferrywood, where other neighborhoods are being gentrified. The people that were pushed out of Ferrywood, we have now moving back into some places in Ferrywood. And we have that with the patio homes in Ferrywood. So, and council's all going to do a tour and see what that's like. But it's people that were gentrified and pushed out from Westgate and are now returning back to that community. So I think that we have a lot to offer in that area because we're doing it right over there, I think, for lots of, and not that our property values aren't going up. They are going up, and it's, we're trying to watch them, but we're working with the URA and with Richard Snipe, who does an amazing job for the city of Pittsburgh in maintaining affordability. And he did 2 stabilization programs in Sheridan. He did some in Elliott. He's doing some currently in Elliott. He did some in Chartier City, and just across in Crafton Heights. So he's done them in different places. So he's been a real asset, and I think it would be great to have him at any time we're talking about housing and affordability or anything. I think he should be at the table because he is the expert. He's been here in the city of Pittsburgh for about 40 years, I think, doing this kind of job. So I think it would be helpful. But and for us, our area fought for R1 zoning. They fought hard for R1 zoning. They appreciate it. They want it. That's what they. And so I'm not going to vote in any way that they don't want me to vote. But I do think that it's worth a conversation and letting them understand, like maybe that if we put it in the areas like where there are, bus stops and schools and shopping and places where we can get to jobs and that kind of stuff, I think we'll have less of a pushback. But I think it's having that conversation with my residents. But I think I think they don't trust us. They don't trust us here in the city to do anything. People went to jail for what they did in my district in terms of housing, and a lot of organizations, a lot of other people are all being held accountable for the same stuff. And so when you're receiving public dollars, when you're doing stuff to the public and changing zoning and changing the way they live, it matters, and they watch it very carefully. But it's like whenever I do anything in terms of zoning, I have to have a really deep conversation and have to make sure that the residents understand fully what we're doing, and so that I understand what we're doing. So I think that it's making sure that they're part of the equation, not excluding them from the conversations. And I think when we talk about inclusivity, to me, that is one of the biggest things. We have to have the people we represent at the table and in meetings. And it's great to have organizations, but when I hear all these people talking about the black community, I'll be honest, the people that they can't afford to come down and take a day off work to come speak at council. So some of you are very privileged in that way that you're able to do that. They're not. And so, and I think the people that would care would love to come down and spend the day, and I think it would be helpful to have some meetings more in the evenings and more on the weekends. And we talk about that a lot in council. We tried to do it several times, but we still don't get a big crowd, as Madam Clerk can attest. But I would love to be able to say, we're coming to you. We really want to hear from you. So, and then really listen and try to come up with some solutions. Like I think when council does it, we do when we listen to the people that we represent, we really do a good job in coming up with some great solutions. So that's it for me. I want to work with you on this, but I'm just going to say before I can commit to a vote, I need to talk to my residents a little bit, especially Chartier City. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And I just want to do a round of thank yous. I want to thank the members that were co-sponsored the bill, also the planning department. Really appreciate all your time on this. Thank our clerk for being here to make sure that I'm staying on task with the names. Appreciate that. And everyone in the audience that kept me on task with the names as well. Appreciate that. I apologize to anyone if I mispronounce your name. And I want to thank my staff for working on this as well. I want to thank the community for continually keeping me engaged. And, you know, I just want to start off by saying that change is uncomfortable. I think that what I'm hearing a lot of is just an uncomfortable
I'm going to say something to
feeling
that.
about what's happening here. But I think we should, well, it's my responsibility since I'm talking right now. This isn't like a back and forth in public hearing usually, but I think we should just, it would help to understand that we're not changing R1. We're not getting rid of R1. So anyone that thinks that this bill is going to allow you to, you know, build duplexes on the same property where it's not allowed currently, where R2 is, this bill doesn't do that. So literally, you know, you can't go up 3 stories, 4 stories. So I'm just speaking to some commenters that have spoke because, you know, I don't want there to be many misleading, potential parts of the conversation that, you know, skew the conversation. So we're also not, you know, we're not going to require someone who has a house currently to then all of a sudden have an attached wall next to them, or I'm sorry, attached to their house. You know, that, I don't know, I'm not the expert on setback yet, maybe. I don't know. But this bill does not do that. It does not force you currently in a detached home to all of a sudden be attached. So there's just a few things I wanted to address. It is very timely that this is a bill that come before us back from city planning, and now we're at the public hearing, and we'll put it on the agenda as soon as possible for next week to have a preliminary vote on it, that it comes at a time in Fair Housing Month, and that it speaks to the need of what a lot of commenters have talked about today, the need of, you know, there's a lot of conversation around our housing crisis because there's not housing, there's not enough affordable housing. A lot of studies they speak to this, and we are sitting here to try and address these concerns. And this bill is, it is one step forward, but there is much more to do. This comes, to us from city planning. Recommended they had a couple edits, but essentially everyone is on board with this. I'm looking at the list of opposed and favor. You know, this list here is people that sign up already give us a little heads up as to where they are in this. And it's very encouraging to see how many people are in favor of this. It's very encouraging to see how many council members are, you know, really speaking highly of this type of zoning change. And so looking forward to next week, a more further robust conversation around attached housing. Literally, houses can touch each other in this bill. And just want to remind everyone that this started as a very small conversation in a community where, yes, residents opposed housing that previously, to be built that would be attached. And, you know, there used to be attached houses that exist in those very lots where they were torn down. I chair the land bank, and every time an attached house comes up where we can save and try and get it back on the market, there's always a conversation of, well, we better do it now, because if it gets torn down, then it'd be very difficult to, a lot more hoops to jump through and red tape right now to actually get that housing built again, just like what it was built previously. And with this bill, it would make it, obviously we're in the business of saving houses, so we don't want that to happen, but it would make that a lot easier. For new builds, it makes it a lot easier for that, for all the red tape to be cut. So I'm looking forward to that conversation, and there will be much more to say about this, but I was encouraged to take that small but yet very important conversation in that community, because Pittsburgh is a very large city compared to the size of the community. And I was very encouraged to walk down the hall and talk to members about their support for this across the entire city. I think that speaks volumes as to what we're about to embark on with zoning bills, future zoning bills, but also all the planning that will go around and engagement that will go around to overhaul our zoning code to allow for more density and more housing. All right, with that, are there any other comments?
Well, I was going to say something, but you're...
Go ahead.
I can't remember what it was. No, go ahead. I'm good.
All right. With that, having exhausted all the business of this public hearing, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.